Have you ever looked at the side of a mountain and imagined it could become a home? Most people wouldn't, but Chu Zhonghu did. In the misty hills of Sichuan, China, just beyond a dense thicket of forest, he began with a simple, almost impossible idea: carve a 2-story villa into solid rock with nothing but his own hands, a few tools, and an unshakable resolve. Gripping a rotary hammer drill, a handheld tool with a chisel tip designed for demolition, he etched the rough outline of the home directly onto the stone. Eventually, he carved enough of an entrance to frame the front. Inside, the stone was still raw, jagged. He picked up the hammer drill again and carved out more room for what would soon be living space. He started by drilling horizontally into the stone at the base of the walls, cutting out perfectly cylindrical cores of rock. Some natural formations inside the mountain didn't fit the future home and had to be removed. Working alone, carving them out was hard, but moving them was even harder. He used chunks of stone as makeshift rails, sliding the heavy blocks out one by one. It was slow, exhausting work that relied on strength and clever thinking. Next comes the ceiling. Armed with a sledgehammer and a rotary hammer drill, he begins shaping it with measured precision. Next, he pulled out a laser leveler and marked exact lines for where to cut, then brought in an angle grinder with a stone-cutting disc. Sparks flew as the saw bit into the rock. Once the saw opened the surface, he turned to the rotary hammer drill again, chiseling along the cut lines. Each removed section revealed more of the emerging interior, and with each layer stripped, he stopped, shoveled, swept. Chu sprays guiding lines with a can of paint, then carves along them with the drill. Every motion deliberate, every line part of a larger plan. Then the floor. He and a helper set to work flattening it out, cutting and clearing the uneven rock with grinders and drills until the surface was manageable. He marked another rectangle, this time for a door on the far wall. The rectangular form emerged slowly, almost reluctantly. He mixed cement by hand, layer after layer, and began setting tile. With each one laid and pressed into place, the floor turned from stone to shelter. Shifting his attention to the wall, Chu begins carving a narrow groove into the stone, the foundation for the electrical wiring. With the cables carefully laid, he fixes a light bulb to the ceiling. A switch is mounted nearby. He flips it, and the room answers with a soft glow. A natural shelf began to take shape, not built but revealed. As Chu chipped away at the rock, a ledge slowly emerged, carved by his hands, yet guided by the stone itself. Using a laser level, he cast crisp green lines across the stone, marking out the dimensions of a new window. The board bent naturally into the curve of the arch. He mixed a fresh batch of cement and began laying bricks across the top of the window frame. By the window, he clears space for a future computer desk. He cut a thick plank of wood and turned it into a shelf just below the window. Cement was spread around the interior edges to tie everything together into one clean, unified shape. Once dry, he dismantled the temporary scaffold. Then, with a grinder, he smoothed out the surface. Now the window needed its final form. The first panel went at the top, shaped to match the arch. More followed below, forming a tight wooden frame that would cradle the opening. The pieces were fixed into place with a nail gun. He moved quickly but precisely. More wood was cut into smaller sections using an electric table saw. These slats would become the window shutters. He assembled them piece by piece, connecting the slats with nails and screws until they moved as one. He mounted the hinges, adjusted the alignment, tested the swing. The shutters opened cleanly, closed firmly. Chu seals up the cracks with foam to keep out rainwater. Then he installs a ventilation screen, a small yet vital detail to prevent mold buildup. With practiced movements, he returns to the main room and begins carving shelves directly into the rock. No nails, no boards, just stone meeting chisel. Strike by strike, shallow recesses take form along the wall, turning raw cliff face into purposeful space. These shelves, born from the very bones of the mountain, are shaped not for decoration, but for function, solid, enduring, and part of the house itself. Now it's time for the water tower. Chu mounts it on higher ground, drills through the outer wall, and cuts a channel inside to run pipes from the tower directly into the home. These are installed swiftly, all connections neatly secured. The floor already has an opening for the toilet, planned in advance. Now Chu turns his attention to the bathroom wall. With steady hands and familiar tools, he begins carving a shallow recess into the stone, a deliberate, careful process. Once the rough form is complete, he smooths the surface with practiced precision, grinding away imperfections until the hollow is clean and even. Into this freshly shaped niche, he places a mirror. Next, Chu moves to the dividing wall between the main room and the bathroom. On the stone surface facing the main room, he begins with a sketch, the outline of a tree. Then, with measured precision, he picks up his tool and begins to cut, following the lines of the painted tree piece by piece, carving into the solid rock from the main room side. When both sides are complete, the two halves align perfectly, revealing the full carved design. Then he shifts focus to the wash basin. First, Chu mounts and tests a water heater. Then Chu turns his gaze to the figure of the woman in the rock, a remnant of an earlier, more poetic impulse. Without ceremony, he begins to erase her. The rock no longer holds her shape, only the memory of what once was. In her place, he mounts a sturdy wooden shelf above the sink. Then, just above it, he installs a mirror, framed, solid, perfectly aligned. He primes the walls and ceiling of what's now becoming a full-fledged bathroom, sealing the stone, preparing it for the final touches that will make it feel complete. Just beyond, in the main room, the shelves he carved earlier into the rock now stand ready. He moves through the space slowly, brush in hand, coating the rough stone surfaces with primer. As the primer dries, the contrast becomes clear. The bathroom is taking on the polished feel of a completed space. Next comes privacy. He lays brick to build a partition wall, enclosing the shower toilet area. Instead of a door, he hangs a waterproof curtain, a practical solution. Now Chu begins crafting a bed. With the circular saw, he makes the first cuts, clean, confident, and precise. Then he takes up the chisel and mallet. He doesn't mark, he carves. He sculpts each notch by feel, fitting joint to joint by hand, testing the connection, refining with every blow. Some beams are set aside to become the headboard, their shapes more vertical and bold. The rest form the rectangular skeleton of the frame, strong, grounded. As the structure takes form, he places a sheet of particle board across the top. It lands with a low, final thud, the bed's platform, firm and fitting. He moves along the edges with an electric planer, shaving away splinters and roughness, smoothing every surface until the wood feels clean to the touch. Finally, with a brush and steady hand, he coats the frame in lacquer. Then come the flower shelves. Carefully marking the placement, he drives a wooden beam from floor to ceiling, then mounts pre-made round shelves to it. Using a level, he checks the alignment. Perfect. He repeats the process for several more. Time for outdoor lighting. A solar-powered lamp is mounted near the window, casting a warm glow at night. The first floor is slowly turning into a livable space, complete with a bed, a bathroom, and even a cozy desk. But that's only half the journey. Outside, a new chapter begins, building the garden, the fish pond, the outdoor kitchen, and the entire second floor that will rise above it all. To level the surface, he tied a wooden plank to a length of rope and pressed it across the ground, packing and smoothing. Tore open a bag of cement and poured it in. Water, was added. With a shovel and a hoe, he mixed the ingredients directly on the ground. Once ready, the mixture was spread across the yard, carefully leveled to avoid slant or pooling. Every inch was worked until the surface looked smooth, clean, and solid. The cylindrical cores he'd once drilled from the heart of the stone, shoved aside as debris, were now given new purpose. One by one, he laid them along the edges of the driveway and yard. He laid a fresh batch of bricks, setting them carefully around the threshold to create a small staircase. Then he cleared a patch of land beside the stone wall and mixed cement. No blueprints, no plans, just memory and instinct. What he built wasn't a room or a wall, it was a fish pond. He began the slow, grinding work of digging again, cutting into the slope with his shovel and clearing out the space. Some stones came up easily, but others were massive, too large to lift alone. He wedged planks and wooden rods beneath them, calling for help when needed. Once the slope was cleared, construction began on something new, a shed. He raised upright tree trunks into the ground as supports. On a ladder, he worked carefully, fitting horizontal logs into pre-carved holes in the stone wall so they could rest securely across the vertical beams. Beneath it, he dug even further, carving into the rock to create space for the kitchen. Soon the cavity took shape. He switched to the cylindrical drill once more, boring out smooth, round sections of the wall, an efficient way to create depth fast. From this process, a furnace began to emerge, an old-style stone stove carved directly into the earth. The interior was then cleaned, the counters scrubbed, and a smooth layer of cement was applied over the top to finalize the structure. Ready to cook, the house had found its kitchen. With the kitchen in place, he turned upward again, cutting a staircase into the rock just beside the shed, chiseling out one step at a time with his drill. Reaching the top, he began to close off the space, placing wide metal sheets across the shed's timber beams. These would become the roof, protecting the entire outdoor cooking area below. But it wasn't just about shielding it from rain. It needed permanence. He poured a layer of cement across the top of the metal sheets, coating the entire surface, smoothing it out by hand until it lay flat and firm. A railing was needed, for safety and perhaps for aesthetics too. He brought in tree trunks, setting them into carved slots along the stair's edge. With a can of black spray paint in hand, he traced out the shape of a door and a window. Then the work began. He brought up his familiar tool, the rotary hammer drill fitted with a cylindrical coring bit. With each push into the wall, the drill carved out a stone cylinder, smooth and precise. He gripped each heavy core by hand, one thud at a time. Some sections were more stubborn, so he turned to chisels, heavy, blunt, effective. As the cavity grew deeper, he worked with practiced rhythm, clearing out the interior in bursts. For every few minutes of cutting, there was always a pause to shovel debris aside or toss a larger chunk over the edge. To make things more efficient, he even built a crude dirt slide down the side of the house, just wide enough for gravel and debris to tumble down without needing to be carried. Every bit of energy was saved for the craft itself. As the room took shape, he used the chisel drill to smooth the interior, clearing rough edges. Large rocks were tossed aside, dust slid down the chute. What was once solid stone now stood open, a hidden room brought to light. He carved into the stairwell with precision, clearing the last remaining barriers with the chisel drill until the staircase was functional, the transition seamless. But his task wasn't over yet. There was still a thick slab of stone sticking into the upper room. He attacked it head-on, hammering chisels into its base, snapping it into manageable pieces. Each chunk was then tossed off the balcony, which now served as both a functional overlook and an architectural flourish above the kitchen. He even added a railing to the balcony. With the second floor now open, it was time to expand. Back upstairs, he returned to the cylinder drill, once again pushing it deep into the wall to hollow out new space. He made a series of clear spray paint markings, then let the water-powered core drill do its work. This expansion wasn't just for function, it was refinement. With his trusted tools in hand, he turns to the final touches. The centerpiece of this phase, a window carved straight through solid stone. He marks the outline carefully, then begins the slow, deliberate work of cutting through the dense rock. With the window complete, he makes a few final adjustments, leveling the floor to match the height of the balcony and smoothing the last rough patch of ceiling. But it's the window that transforms the space, inviting in the outside world and letting the finished home finally breathe. When the wall gave way to a wider chamber, Chu turned to the smaller details. He added bamboo to the outer facade, long, natural poles fastened cleanly to the stone. He installed more hand railings, crafted with the same care and honesty as the rest of the build. The house no longer looked like a hollow carved in rock. It looked lived in. And at last, with sweat wiped clean and tools laid to rest, Q invited a friend to see what had become of that silent stone wall. Together, they stepped into the house. They walked through the rooms, cool, quiet, and carved by hand. The stone air offered natural insulation, wrapping the space in a stillness only rock can offer. The bathroom functioned. The plumbing, the stove, the stairs, all operational. Wires ran discreetly through the rooms, hinting at makeshift electric work he'd embedded into the stone structure, simple yet effective. There was pride in his voice as he pointed to places still awaiting completion. A shelf here, a corner there, possibilities. But even now, even unfinished, the home stood firm, a two-story house carved into the living mountain, complete with water, electricity, design, and intention.